Okay. Well, one of the questions that came up before, Shirley, which you're the expert on, is how important is it to engage with Learning Futures?
Absolutely. Well, Learning Futures has been our teaching and learning strategy for some years now. I think we started in 2012. So it would be very odd to find an application where someone hadn't been engaged in some aspect of Learning Futures. But if you've got another approach to teaching and learning that you have decided that you think is more effective, then absolutely explain that. But it better be effective. As I said, there is no right answer to these. It just needs to be a coherent story. Yeah.
When someone receives a citation, what is it that really university is acknowledging? What is the core thing that you do?
A university citation, teaching and learning citation. Well, it depends on the criterion that you have addressed. It's whatever is that criterion, then the university committee has decided that the evidence you have presented has made a case for that criterion. And that's why you get a citation. But that's a good thing, because that's external recognition, external being outside of you, saying I'm a great teacher. It's someone else saying, yes, you are. Yeah.
Shirley, is there value in pursuing fellowship with the Higher Education Academy in the UK?
As some people know, a number of universities in Australia have decided to go down the route of encouraging their staff to apply to become a Higher Education Academy Fellow. In Australia it's called Advanced Higher Education. And we have made a decision not to do that. But if you want to do it, there's nothing stopping you. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the area of leadership is very challenging. Can you say a bit more about what leadership looks like in a good application, in the sense that it might not be a position as leader, it might be that position of influencing others around you?
Yeah. One of the interesting things that happens when we go around, when I say we, I mean, I've heard this from other senior executives, sometimes you go to faculties and you say, do you have any ideas about how we can do more of X, Y, Z? And people say, oh, well, why don't we do this? And we say, what a great idea, why haven't you done it? And I say, oh, I thought I needed permission. No, you don't. Every one of us is a leader. And when we see opportunities to do something better or differently, then for heaven's sake, do it. So you don't need permission unless it's something outrageous against policy. But I think academics enjoy a level of autonomy that's probably most people don't enjoy that level of autonomy. So coming up with new ideas or ways of doing something differently or better, and then absolutely making it happen is an example of leadership that is open to everybody. As you become more senior, you might be looking at leading projects or leading groups and so on, but it just depends on the level. But everyone should see themselves as a leader.
Can I just add to that? If you've done something exciting, sometimes people from your area or even from other faculties will say, can you show me how to do that? I mean, I really love the experience of talking about 10 years ago at a teaching and learning forum about Facebook. Then I made a connection with a woman from engineering who I'd never even heard of, and Anne Gardner's now leads she's got some fancy job, but she used Facebook like the clappers because it just encouraged students to engage. So, I mean, that's leadership in a strange way as well. And,
no, it's not a strange way, that's leadership.
Right, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Can I ask you, I really enjoyed your report and I've learned a lot. Thanks very much. My question is, because
as you mentioned, you were experienced assessing some of the applications, and you touched on the best. One of the applications that you saw was that started with the philosophy of teaching and learning. I'm wondering about the structure, the best structure when we're actually doing the application. Can you give some suggestions on that? For example, do you go criteria by criteria, or do you kind of do that?
Yes, as you know, even in the new promotions policy, there are dot points that give you a guide to areas that you might address. Just imagine yourself being on the promotions committee and having 50 applications to read. I think you're limited to 6 pages now, but it was more than that before. Some people just decide to write an essay, and then the committee has to go through and try and find where all those dot points are. The easiest applications to read are the ones that start out with a philosophy or an approach or something, and then they address how they achieve that in each of the dot points that's clearly labelled. I mean, of course, not everything can be reduced to dot points, and sometimes people even embed it in bold in the narrative and say this is an example of exemplary approach to design of new courses, for example. So you don't need the structure to disrupt it, but you need to have some signposts to make it easier for the committee. It's reading a large number of applications. Yeah. The other thing is, if you provide supporting information, make sure, or supporting artefacts, make sure they actually back up the story. There was one application many years ago where the guy said that he was a fantastic presenter, as you can see from this video. And so I clicked on this video, it gave all evidence to the contrary. Sometimes academics don't do well in front of screens, but if you're going to provide it at all, make sure it's a good example of how to do it well. Not. Any other questions? Yeah.
Shirley, can you talk about measurement of impact of teaching?
Measurement of impact. So the impact of teaching is a sort of so what. Okay, so you taught this class, so what happened? Did all the students suddenly decide this was not a major for them? Or did they all go on and enroll in PhDs? Or did, that's just one example. It's really, if you think about it as the so what, did the students really achieve a lot as a result of taking your subject? And that can be in terms of employment. Did they get jobs as a result of having done that subject? Did they win awards? I mean, they're extreme examples of outcomes, but just think about it. But the best advice I could give anyone, especially if you're starting out in your academic career, is to read some of the literature on the reflective practitioner.
Oh, yes.
And start getting into that way of thinking about everything that you do. Keep a journal. Keep little stories of things. Keep any results that you want to keep. Do evaluation. Write up what the evaluation told you. And even if it's something that you're not happy about, and we've all had that experience, you get 100 student comments and there's one that's negative and 99 that are positive, but you really hold on tight to that one that's been negative. Maybe a good way of helping you to deal with it, I've done this myself, is to actually write it down, get it off your chest, and just think about, I mean, it's only one student out of 100, so I would advise ignoring it. But you may have 4 or 5, for example, and say, well, what am I going to do about this? And it just helps you keep a narrative about your career as a teacher. And when you look back in years to come, you'll say, wow, look at all these amazing things I did. And it will absolutely help you to apply for promotion, apply for awards, apply for another job if you want them, because you've got all the evidence in one place rather than on bits of paper and files on hard disks that don't boot up anymore and so on.